Folks, welcome back to the garage. We're out here today with our used motorcycle Rehab SV650. We're going to address one of the very last things that's actually wrong with the bike, and that is this. Can you see how the lever sticks when I'm pulling it? It's not supposed to do that. It should move smoothly. Now, this could be for a number of different reasons, and we're going to address two of them that seem like the most likely to me, and we'll leave the last for just in case. But the two reasons are either the calipers themselves are sticking down at the wheel, or the lever itself is sticking up at the master cylinder, and it's not the piston in the bore that's sticking. I've never seen a piston get stuck in a bore like that, but it looks like the lever might be kind of rusty and needs some lubrication, so we're going to deal with that today. Now, before we get to the calipers, we're going to address the master cylinder, and our previous owner has graced us with this problem. Check this out. You see the screws here? That screw is badly stripped, and it's so badly stripped that we can't remove it using a screwdriver, and we're going to have to do something more invasive than I would like, and for that we're going to use a Dremel. But an ounce of prevention for this problem is worth a pound of cure in the form of this guy right here. This is a JIS screwdriver, and if you look carefully at it, see that? The tip of it is less pointy than a Phillips. And that's important because it means that it gets a proper grip on the screw. This being a Japanese motorcycle, the screws that are used on it are almost exclusively JIS and not Phillips, even though they look the same. And the difference is important. So, an ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure, what you need is one of these guys. Okay, here we are at the master cylinder. Now we can notice a few things here. First, this screw is stripped, and we'll have to deal with this later before we can finish the job. But that's a job for later in the process. Also, this pivot pin looks pretty rusty and crusty, and it would not strike me as unusual if, in fact, this isn't greased, and that's the reason that our brake sticks. So, we're going to take this out, and we're going to clean it, and if it's rusty, we'll sand the rust off with a little bit of 220 grit sandpaper, and then we'll grease it and put it back, and we'll check if that fixed our problem. Now, it's important to note that this pin is held in with threads in two locations. One is in the master cylinder itself, on the tab on the bottom like this. The other is an actual nut that serves as a backup and jams this in place such that it doesn't back out when you use the brakes. So in order to get this out, we got to hold that nut in place with a 10mm wrench and use a flathead screwdriver to remove this. So we'll hold the nut in place with a wrench. We'll take a flathead screwdriver, use it to turn this guy. There we go. So once it stops coming out anymore when you turn it, you can pull the pin out, and your lever should come right out then. Don't lose the nut. We can see that we've got quite a bit of rust on our pivot pin and our lever itself here. So we're going to clean these off before we re-grease and reinstall. So to clean it off, I'm going to use a paper towel and some brake clean. I'm just going to get a little bit on there. Shouldn't take much at all. Give it a twist in the paper towel. And we'll let it dry for just a minute here. Now we need to get the rust off of it. And in order to do that, I'm going to use just a little piece of 220 grit sandpaper. Basically what we want is to just get the rust off of the pin. There we go. See that? Much better. We also use a little brake cleaner to clean the lever off. There we go. Now we're ready to grease the pin, put it back on the bike. Before we reassemble anything, we're just going to wipe out this space in here where the lever goes. Make sure we've gotten any crud out of there. And then we'll just very lightly grease the inside of there, like that. Now we're ready to reinstall our pin with the lever. So we'll put a little bit of the grease on the pin. We stick the lever back in its little home. Get the holes lined up. Then we stick our pin back in the hole. And now we'll go ahead and turn the pin back down into its bore. Wipe off the excess grease from here. Now let's try the lever. See, no more sticking now. So that has addressed our most immediate problem, which was that the lever itself would stick and make the brake feel be inconsistent, which was obviously quite bad. While we're out here though, because the brake fluid looks really old, we're gonna go ahead and change it, and while we've got it empty, we're gonna do the calipers. But first, we have to deal with this. Now, currently the brakes work, and we could ride it somewhere if we needed to. But we gotta get this out in order to be able to refill it. And as we can see, that has been right boogered up by the previous owner. This other one is still good, and it looks like the 200-pound gorilla that demolished that was at least wise enough to stop before he destroyed this one. So we'll at least see if we can get this screw out of our reservoir cap. Yeah, that one is actually pretty loose. But the other one is in there pretty good, and it's been stripped. So we need to get this out before we go any further, just in case we do in fact have to ride the bike somewhere. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use a Dremel to cut a little slot in the top of this screw and use that and a flathead screwdriver to see if we can't get this screw out. So we'll go ahead. There we go. We're just starting to nick the reservoir cap. So we want to stop there and try to get this out with the screwdriver now. So we'll grab our flathead screwdriver and stick it in our slot. See if this... Not even close. Okay, we're gonna have to go deeper. That's a bummer, but unfortunately, there's nothing else for it. If we want to get this cap off, we have to get that out somehow. Drilled the hole deeper still, and we're still not really budging it. I think, though, the way I may go about this is we can always drill this out. And there we go. Now that we've drilled enough of the screw out, you see, we can back the rest of it out. Now, we don't want to get any of these shavings inside here, so we're going to go ahead and vacuum this off before we actually remove the cap. But the important part is done, and we've broken this screw loose. Okay, with that cleaned off, we can back these out. Okay, here we are down at one of the wheels, and we need to drain the fluid out of the system so that it's not overflowing up at the reservoir. And in order to do that, we need to open one of the bleed screws. So we're going to use this one over here. And we'll go ahead and put our bleed bottle on here. Get our hose. Take our little cap off here. Put this guy on there like that. And now we need to open this. And this should be an 8mm. So the proper tool for these is not an irregular 8mm combination wrench, but rather this guy. This here is what's called a line wrench, and it's a big meaty combination wrench that wraps almost all the way around. You can see instead of 2 drive surfaces like a regular crescent wrench, this actually has 5, and there's one missing here, which allows us to slip it over a line. So we're gonna just pull this guy off for just a second. We're gonna put it on there. And this fits much more securely on there. It makes it much less likely that you strip bleed screws. It's also useful for like automotive brake lines where they have a steel and brass arrangement. So we're gonna break that loose just like that. We've already got some fluid coming out. So we're gonna put our hose on there. We're gonna open it again. We'll go ahead and let the fluid drain. What if we put this guy there? How about that? There we go. That's maybe a little better. With our bleed screw open down at the bottom, we can go ahead and break this loose, and in so doing, that will speed up the draining of the fluid through the system quite a bit. You just loosen that up and pull this up just a hair. See, it's not coming out now. So, there we go. That's what we wanted. Now, we're going to wait until the fluid stops coming out down at the bottom before we continue. Okay, once the fluid has stopped draining out of our caliper, we can go ahead and pull our bleed bottle hose off. And we stick it back on the nipple there. And now we go to the other side and drain the fluid out of that side. All right, once again, we remove our little rubber cap from our bleed screw. We use a line wrench to loosen the bleed screw. There we go. You want to be careful not to spill any more than you have to, because it's pretty nasty stuff. Then take our bleed bottle hose, put it on there. Once again, we open bleed nipple. You stay? No, you won't. Oh, come on. Okay. Once you've got that broken loose, you can remove your line wrench and replace it with a regular one. So now we can use our regular 8mm. There we go. To drain the fluid out. Once again, we'll open the bleed screw some more and let it drain for a few minutes until we stop getting fluid coming out of here. Okay, once we stop getting fluid draining out of there, we can remove our hose. Now we're ready to remove our caliper and take it over to the bench and replace the seals. In order to do that, we need to remove this guy here, this bolt here, which is the fluid line, and these two bolts that attach it to the fork. This one looks like a 12. These are 14s, and I'll bet that's a 10. We'll remove this mounting line first. Gives us some play in the line itself. And then we'll remove this fluid line. Now, you don't want to use an impact on that, so go ahead and use a regular ratchet. And you want to be prepared for this. Turn that in a little bit so that it maybe stops dripping. Now, when you remove this, you're going to get more fluid that comes out. I've never been able to do it where I actually drained all of the fluid out. So, what I like to do to avoid more spillage than necessary is to use a plastic bag like this and slip it over the line once you disconnect it, and then hold it in place with a rubber band or a little clip or something, so that if there's any fluid in the line, it drains into the bag and you can deal with the bag later, versus just draining out on the floor, which is a pain. So, we've got this broken loose now, so we'll go ahead and remove our fitting. Get your bag under here, catch any drips. And look at that, we're actually not dripping. So, don't lose your banjo bolt, and that is looking really crusty. Huh. Okay, we'll have to look into that. So we take our bag here, and we get a clip. Pull this tight, clip it in place like that. Now, if there's any fluid that dribbles down in here, it'll end up in the bag, and we can deal with the bag much more easily. Now, we've got the caliper disconnected from everything except the fork itself. So we can use a 14 to deal with that. And then the little persuasion should come right off. Be careful not to turn this upside down because it's going to still be full of brake fluid. The caliper is still full of brake fluid, so I like to drain it out into my bleed bottle first. Makes it a little bit easier to deal with. We need to remove this bracket and get the pads out of there. So now we can pull the pin out there, set our pads aside. We want to be careful not to get the brake fluid on the pads. And then the pad comes off like that. Now we're ready to do the caliper itself. So let's first pull this bracket out if we can. You see how stiff this slides on the guide pins. It should move more easily than that. So it's a good thing we're doing this. This doesn't seem to be a terribly healthy caliper. So you want to just pull on it until it comes out. You're going to have to break these boots loose here. See that? They stick on these little ribs here. There we go. So we'll go ahead and we'll cut our old dust boot out of here. Pull the remains out this way. Now we're going to use an air compressor in here to force the pistons out. But first, we need to put a piece of wood or something in here to stop them from coming out all the way and then flying off into no man's land. What I find works really good for this is a paint stirrer. You don't need a terribly powerful air compressor for this, but you do need this end with this rubber nipple thing on it. We've got our paint stirrer in between the pistons, and you want to make sure you keep your fingers out of there when you do this, because the pistons are going to come out with a great deal of force. So, we turn our compressor on. Make sure you got your eye protection on. Stick this guy in the hole. And there we are. Now, we can get our paint stirrer out of the way. You're going to have to push this little clip down. There we go. To get them to clear and come out of there. And that's pretty gross looking. Okay, we've got one piston out. We can see in here we have this little clip that's going to get in the way of the end of the piston when they come out. You may have to push that down with something, either your finger or a tool of some sort. But you should be able to just pull the pistons the rest of the way out with your fingers. There we go. And that is some real grossness in there. I'm glad we took this apart. This is way worse than I thought. However, I think the caliper is probably okay. Unhook it there and it should, there we go, okay. Get this guy out and set it aside. This keeps the pads from rattling. You want to be real careful when you do this because this caliper is aluminum and the pick is steel. But we've got 2 seals for each side. So we use the pick and we just gently dig them out like that. We got one, this outer seal is just to keep crap out of it. And the inner seal is what actually does the sealing of the fluid. So you just use the pick, careful not to scratch the caliper. And they come right out. There we go. Pull that out, set them aside. Okay, so now our caliper is as stripped down as we can get. Oh, also want to remove our old bleeder screw. So we're going to replace that. So we'll grab our 8. Bleed screw goes here in our pile of trash. This we're keeping. Also the piston. So we'll set the piston aside. And now we need to clean this. The first round of cleaning, we're going to do brake cleaner. I'm going to let that dry, and then we'll go and we'll use a regular degreaser to finish cleaning this up. Once you get the caliper and the pistons reasonably clean, set them aside and let them dry. Basically, you definitely don't want any water in here or in any of the passages that get exposed to the brake fluid. Okay, with our caliper clean and dry, notice this face actually changed color. We'll open our box of parts here, see what we've got. Caliper guide boot looks like this. It goes right here. We've got another one that goes right here. We've got a little pot of vegetable-based grease, which is used to seal our, or to lubricate our seals in here for assembly. Got a little bag of hardware, including a fresh bleed valve. We got crush washers, and we got the little cap for the bleed valve in there. And finally, we've got our bag of the seals themselves, and there are 4 in here, 2 for each bore, 2 fat ones and 2 skinny ones, like this. So for each bore you want 1 skinny one and 1 fat one. So we'll grab those guys and set them aside here. So we open our pot of grease and get just a dab. We want to lubricate the seal. We're going to do the fat one first, which goes farther in. And this is what actually does the sealing of the caliper. Get it pretty well lubed, like this. You don't want a whole lot. You just want to make sure that it's coated. And then we slide it in there into the farther in sealing slot. Kind of help it in there. Just use your fingers. And there we go. Got one in. So grab the other fat one, get some more grease on our hand. If you've ever smelled castor oil, that's what this grease smells like. It's a very, very satisfying smell. I really like it. Reminds me of old machinery. There we go. Okay. So there we got our actual seals in. And now we do our dust seals, which are these thinner ones. They're a little trickier actually. Get them into their spot. There we go. There's one. Get the grease on here. There we go. Okay. And then we get our freshly cleaned pistons. And we just kind of stick them in there. And once you get them in straight, they should slide right in. I'm going to push them all the way in, just like that. So you get it. Push it in. Push it all the way in. And there we go. We got our pistons in. Our next order of business is unfortunately the hardest part of this whole operation. We got to get this guy into there. So I'm going to use some of this castor oil grease. And I may live to regret this, but whenever I've not done that, it fights me. Kind of cram it in there like that. So see, getting that fat end through here is way harder than you'd think it should be. Can we use a screwdriver and kind of push it? There we go. Okay, maybe that's how you do it. There we go. So we got that in. Finally, we need our boot over here that goes on this. There we go. We've got our boots installed. We're going to give this castor oil grease a shot on our guide pins, since it seems to be what the brake crafters folks who make the kit want us to use. So we take our caliper here, or this guy, and we just grease the pins. Then we put our caliper bracket. Is that right? It's gotta be right. Yeah, okay. So we fit that back into our holes there. And then our last step is to get the boots over the lips on the bracket. There. Grab this little guy. So it fits in. You got these two little tabs here that have a home down here. So you get them into place. And then, there we go. Okay. So there's that. And last, we need our brake pads. Take our pad with one ear, and that one ear goes over here where the pin with the R-clip goes. We slide this in. We get that tab aligned with that, and there's a tab over here that aligns with this. We set that into place. Take our other pad, we hook the big hole onto our pin, slide it into place, grab one of these guys, feed it down through the little holes and into place. Then we grab our R-clip and we rotate it just so, see, it has this lip here. We stick our R-clip in there. And you know what? We need to massage this R-clip just a little bit. Make our R-clip a little more R-shaped. Okay. Take our R-clip, we stick it down in there like that. Okay. Then make sure your pad slides as far back as you can get it, so that you've got plenty of gap in here to slide this over the rotor. So there's one caliper reassembled. Okay, back at the bike, it's just a matter of slipping this guy over the rotor and getting our bolts started. And now we'll take our little bag of hardware, dump it out in here, and we've got two crush washers. We've got our bleeder valve seal, or cover thing. We've got our fresh bleeder valve. So we'll put the bleeder valve in its bore here. Now we need our banjo bolt and our two crush washers. One crush washer on the banjo bolt. Put the banjo bolt through the line, another crush washer just like that, and thread the bolt into the caliper. So the torque spec for these is 28 foot-pounds. Goes this way, right there, and this one right there. And the spec for this one It is 17 foot-pounds. There we go. Also got our brake line bolt up here. The torque spec on this one is just kind of a snug one UGG deal. This is not a particularly critical fastener, so we just don't want it coming loose. There we go, one caliper done. Notice that it's quite loose on here, and it won't get snug until we fill the system back up with the fluid. All right, guys. At this point, I'm going to omit the process of overhauling the left-hand caliper. The front calipers on the SV650 are the same left to right, other than being mirror images, and in fact, the rebuild kits include exactly the same parts and are interchangeable. So, since nothing particularly interesting happened while I was rebuilding it, I'm going to skip that. And just understand that if you're following along, you also need to do that same process I just did on the left-hand caliper as well. And now it's time to bleed the brakes. Let's carry on. So there we have it. It's actually a couple of weeks later, and it took me that long to get around to riding the bike. But I'm happy to report that our sketchy brake issue is now resolved. And if I had to guess at what actually did that, it would be the pivot pin and not the calipers themselves. Nevertheless, the calipers were pretty gross looking, and I'm definitely glad we went ahead and did that. We know that the seals won't be deteriorating anytime soon now. So, if you wanted to be really thorough, you would also do the master cylinder, but frankly, I didn't really think that was the issue, and they're cheap enough you might consider just replacing it. At any rate, if you're doing this at home on your own bike, I hope this helped you out. And if not, I hope you were at least entertained. And as always, I will see you in the next one. Bleeder when you open it. See that?